I have a photo of myself standing in front of the Twin Towers on September 12th, 2001. The problem is I was born in 2003. And before you click away thinking this is fake, let me show you why the government has been trying to contact me for the last 6 months. My name is Alex. I'm 21 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon. And 3 years ago, I started experiencing memories that weren't mine. At first, I thought I was going crazy. Then I thought maybe I'd seen these things in movies or documentaries, and my brain was confusing fiction with reality. But then I found the photographs. Real, physical photographs that show me my actual face at historical events that happened before I was born. And I'm not the only one this is happening to. Let me start from the beginning. When I was 18, I started having these really vivid dreams. Not normal dreams where everything is fuzzy and doesn't make sense. These were different. They felt like memories, like I was remembering something that had actually happened to me. The first one was about a concert. I was standing in a huge crowd, thousands of people all around me, and everyone was screaming and crying. There was a band on stage for guys, and they were playing music that sounded like it was from the 60s or 70s. The Beatles, I realized later. I was watching the Beatles perform live. In the dream, I could feel everything. The heat from all the bodies pressed together. The smell of cigarette smoke and sweat. The vibration of the music in my chest. Someone next to me was holding a sign that said, "We love you, Paul." Another person was trying to throw something onto the stage. I woke up from that dream and immediately thought it was weird but not impossible. Maybe I'd watched a documentary about the Beatles before bed, and my brain had created this immersive dream based on what I'd seen. That happens, right? But then it happened again. Different dream, different memory. This time I was in a city, walking down a street lined with shops and restaurants. It was hot, summer probably. I was wearing clothes that felt wrong, too formal, like a suit jacket and dress pants, even though it was sweltering outside. Everyone around me was dressed the same way, like we were all going to church or a wedding. I walked past a storefront and caught my reflection in the window. It was me, my face, but something about it was slightly different. Younger maybe, or just different in a way I couldn't quite place. Then I heard someone shouting. People started running. I turned around and saw smoke rising from a building a few blocks away. Black smoke, thick and oily. More shouting. Sirens starting to wail in the distance. Someone grabbed my arm and pulled me into a shop. "Get inside," they said. Something's happened at the federal building. I woke up sweating, my heart racing. The dream had felt so real. Too real. I tried to shake it off. Went about my day. Went to my job at a coffee shop, made lattes, came home, played video games. Normal stuff. But that night, the dreams came back. This time I was at a protest. Hundreds of people marching down a street, carrying signs, chanting. The signs said things like "End the war" and "Bring our troops home." Some of them had peace symbols. Everyone was young, college age mostly. Someone was playing guitar while walking, singing a song I didn't recognize. The police were there too, lining the streets, watching us. They had helmets and shields. They looked nervous. Then something happened. Someone threw something, a bottle maybe, and it shattered on the ground near the police line. The police surged forward. People started screaming and running. I got knocked down and someone stepped on my hand. The pain was intense, sharp, and immediate. I woke up grabbing my hand, expecting to see it bruised or swollen. But it was fine, completely normal. That's when I started getting scared. These weren't normal dreams. They were too detailed, too consistent, and they all had something in common. They all felt like they were from the past. The clothes people wore, the cars I saw, the way people talked. Everything felt like it was from decades ago. I started writing them down. Every time I had one of these dreams, I'd wake up and immediately write down everything I could remember. Dates, if they were mentioned. Places. Names. Anything that might help me figure out what was going on. After 2 months, I had a notebook filled with dozens of these experiences. And when I started researching them online, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They were all real events. The concert with the Beatles? That was Shea Stadium in 1965. I looked up photos from that concert and recognized the exact spot where I'd been standing in my dream. The building with the black smoke? That was the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. The federal building. I researched it and found news footage from that day, and the street I'd been walking down was right there, exactly as I'd remembered it. The protest? That was the Vietnam War protests in 1970. Kent State, specifically. The protests where the National Guard opened fire and killed 4 students. I was remembering real historical events. Events that happened decades before I was born. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd learned about these events in school, and my brain was creating false memories based on that information. Maybe I'd seen documentaries or movies about them. Maybe I'd read about them online and forgotten about it. And my subconscious was bringing it back in dream form. But that didn't explain how detailed the memories were. It didn't explain how I could feel the heat and smell the smoke and hear the exact words people were saying. And it definitely didn't explain what happened next. I decided to talk to a therapist about it. I found someone who specialized in sleep disorders and memory issues, a woman named Dr. Patterson. I told her about the dreams, about how real they felt, about how they all corresponded to actual historical events. She listened patiently and then asked me a question that I wasn't expecting. Have you ever experienced any gaps in your memory? Times where you can't remember where you were or what you were doing? I thought about it. Not really. I mean, I don't remember every single day of my life, but I don't think I have any major gaps. What about before these dreams started? Can you clearly remember your childhood? That's when I realized something strange. I could remember recent things perfectly. High school, my job, my friends. But when I try to think back further to elementary school or early childhood, things got fuzzy. Not missing exactly, but less clear. Less detailed. It's hard to remember specific things from when I was really young, I admitted. But isn't that normal? Don't most people have trouble remembering early childhood? To an extent, yes, Dr. Patterson said. But combined with these vivid historical memories you're experiencing, it raises some interesting questions. She paused. I'd like to try something, if you're open to it. Hypnotherapy. It's a technique we use to access memories that might be buried or suppressed. It might help us understand what's causing these dreams. I agreed, mostly because I was desperate for answers. The hypnotherapy session was weird. Dr. Patterson had me sit in a comfortable chair and talk to me in this calm, soothing voice, telling me to relax and focus on her words. Slowly, I felt myself drifting into this strange state where I was aware of what was happening, but also felt disconnected from it. She asked me to go back to one of the memories from my dreams, the Beatles concert. She asked me to describe it in as much detail as possible. I started talking, describing the crowd, the stage, the music. But then something else came up, something I hadn't remembered in the dream. There's someone next to me, I heard myself saying. A woman. She's holding my hand. She's crying because she's so happy to see them perform. She says this is the best day of her life. Who is she? Dr. Patterson asked. I don't know, but she feels familiar, like I've known her forever. Look at her face. Tell me what you see. I try to focus on the woman's face in the memory, but it was blurry, like an old photograph that's been damaged. I can't see her clearly, but she has dark hair, brown eyes. She's wearing a dress with flowers on it. What else do you see? There's a man on my other side, older. He's wearing glasses and a button-up shirt. He keeps checking his watch like he needs to be somewhere else, but he's staying for her. For the woman. Do you know who he is? My father, I said, and then immediately felt confused because that wasn't right. My father was alive and well, living in Seattle, and he looked nothing like the man in this memory. Dr. Patterson brought me out of the hypnotic state slowly. When I was fully aware again, she was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Alex, she said carefully, I think what you're experiencing might be something called genetic memory or ancestral memory. It's a controversial theory, but some researchers believe that we can inherit memories from our ancestors through our DNA. Traumatic or emotionally significant events might leave an imprint that gets passed down through generations. I stared at her. You're saying I'm remembering things my ancestors experienced? It's one possible explanation. The woman at the concert, the man you identified as your father, they could be relatives from previous generations. Your grandparents or great-grandparents, perhaps. But I remember being there, not watching someone else be there. I remember it like it's my own memory. That's how genetic memory is theorized to work. The memories are integrated into your consciousness as if they're your own experiences. She leaned forward. I'd like you to do something for me. Talk to your family. Ask them about their history. See if any of your relatives were at these events you're remembering. It might help us understand what's happening. I left her office feeling more confused than when I'd arrived. Genetic memory? It sounded like science fiction, but I didn't have a better explanation. That night, I called my mom. She lives in Seattle with my dad, and we usually talk once a week or so. After some small talk, I carefully brought up the topic. Hey, Mom, did Grandma ever talk about going to any Beatles concerts? There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's random. Why do you ask? I just had this weird dream about it, and I was curious. Well, actually, yes. Your grandmother was obsessed with the Beatles. She went to see them at Shea Stadium when she was 18. She talked about it all the time when I was growing up. She said it was one of the best nights of her life. My heart started beating faster. Did she go alone? No. She went with her parents. Your great-grandparents. Her father didn't even like the Beatles, but he took them because your grandmother begged for months. The woman with the dark hair and the dress with flowers. The man with glasses checking his watch. They were real. They were my relatives. Mom, can you send me some photos of Grandma? Old ones, from when she was young. Sure, honey. Is everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Just feeling nostalgic, I guess. She said she'd dig out some old photo albums and scan some pictures for me. We talked for a few more minutes, and then I hung up. 2 days later, she emailed me a bunch of scanned photos. I opened them on my laptop, hands shaking slightly. The third photo made me gasp out loud. It was my grandmother at maybe 18 or 19 years old, wearing a dress with flowers on it, standing between her parents in front of what looked like a stadium. The date written on the back of the photo, visible in the scan, said August 15th, 1965. Shea Stadium, the Beatles concert, and her face. It was the same face I'd seen in my memory, crying tears of joy next to me in the crowd. I spent the next week researching my family history obsessively. I called relatives I barely knew, asking them about their lives, about where they'd been, about what they'd done. I dug through old documents and records online, and I found connections. So many connections. The Oklahoma City bombing memory? My great-uncle had been in downtown Oklahoma City that day. He'd been a few blocks away when the bomb went off. The Vietnam protest? My grandfather had been a college student at Kent State in 1970. He'd been at the protest, though thankfully he wasn't one of the students who'd been shot. Every single memory I'd been having corresponded to an event that one of my relatives had experienced firsthand. But that raised even more questions. Why was this happening to me? Why now? And why were the memories so vivid, so complete, as if I'd actually been there? I went back to Dr. Patterson and showed her what I'd found. She was fascinated, but also concerned. This is remarkable, she said, looking through the photos and family history I compiled. I've read about cases of genetic memory, but I've never seen documentation this clear before. She looked up at me. How are you feeling about all this? Honestly, freaked out. It's like I have someone else's life in my head. Multiple someone else's. And the dreams keep coming. Almost every night now. What are the new memories about? I pulled out my notebook. Last night, I was at a lunch counter sit-in during the civil rights movement. The night before that, I was watching the moon landing on a TV in someone's living room. And the night before that, I was in a bomb shelter during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and everyone around me thought we were about to die in a nuclear war. Dr. Patterson frowned. These memories are becoming more frequent. Yeah, and more intense. They don't feel like dreams anymore. They feel like I'm actually there, living those moments. When I wake up, it takes me a few minutes to remember who I am and what year it is. Alex, I think you should consider seeing a neurologist. This could be a neurological condition causing these vivid hallucinations. Yes, they correspond to your family history, but that could be because your brain is drawing on information you learned about your family in the past. But I didn't know about most of these things. I didn't know my great-uncle was in Oklahoma City during the bombing. I didn't know my grandfather was at Kent State. I didn't know any of this until I started researching after the dreams. She didn't have an answer for that. Over the next few months, the memories got worse. Or more intense, I guess. More frequent, definitely. Some nights, I'd have multiple memories, jumping from one time period to another. I'd be at Woodstock in 1969, then suddenly at Pearl Harbor in 1941, then at the Challenger explosion in 1986. I started having trouble distinguishing my own memories from the inherited ones. Sometimes I'd be at work, making coffee, and suddenly I'd have a flash of being somewhere else, someone else. I'd have to grip the counter and remind myself that I was Alex. I was 21 years old. I was in Portland in 2024. It was affecting my whole life. I couldn't hold down my job because I was too exhausted from not sleeping properly. My friends stopped calling because I'd started acting weird, canceling plans, spacing out in the middle of conversations. My girlfriend broke up with me because she said I wasn't present anymore, that it felt like I was always somewhere else. She was right. I was somewhere else. I was in 100 different places across 7 decades of American history. I tried to stop it. I tried sleeping pills, meditation, staying awake as long as possible. Nothing worked. The memories kept coming. Then, about a year after the dream started, something different happened. I had a memory that didn't match any of my family history. I was in New York City, September 2001. I could tell because I saw a calendar in a shop window that said September 11th. I was walking down a street in Lower Manhattan, on my way to work probably, carrying a briefcase and a cup of coffee. It was a beautiful morning. Clear blue sky. Warm, but not too hot. People were everywhere, heading to their offices, talking on their cell phones, the giant brick ones that people used back then. I walked past a subway entrance and heard someone playing a saxophone. I dropped $1 in their case without stopping. I checked my watch. 8:45 a.m. I was going to be late. Then I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. A roar, low and loud, that made everyone on the street stop and look up. I looked up too, and I saw the plane. It was flying too low, way too low for a commercial aircraft in the middle of the city. And it was heading straight for the North Tower of the World Trade Center. I watched frozen as it hit. The impact, the explosion, the fireball that erupted from the side of the building. People around me started screaming. Someone dropped their coffee, and it shattered on the sidewalk next to me. Someone else was calling 911 on their phone, their voice shaking as they tried to explain what they'd just seen. I stood there, staring up at the burning building, unable to process what I was witnessing. This couldn't be real. This had to be an accident. A terrible, tragic accident. But then, 17 minutes later, the second plane hit the South Tower. And I knew, we all knew, this wasn't an accident. I woke up crying, actually sobbing, tears running down my face, my whole body shaking, because that memory had felt different from the others. More personal, more traumatic, and it didn't make sense. None of my relatives had been in New York City during 9/11. I'd already checked that when I was researching my family history. My grandmother had been in Seattle. My grandfather had been in Arizona. My parents had been in California. My aunts and uncles and cousins had all been scattered across the country, but none of them had been in New York that day. So whose memory was this? I spent the next 3 days trying to figure out. I called every relative I could think of, asking if they'd been in New York in September 2001. Everyone said no. I was starting to think maybe Dr. Patterson was right. Maybe this was all just my brain malfunctioning, creating these vivid hallucinations based on historical events I'd learned about. Maybe the genetic memory theory was wrong, and I was just mentally ill. But then I found the box. I was at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. After dinner, I was helping my mom clean out the garage, and I found an old cardboard box labeled Dad's Stuff College. I asked if I could look through it, and she said sure. Inside was typical college stuff. Textbooks, old papers, some photos. But at the bottom of the box, underneath everything else, was a manila envelope. I opened it. Inside were documents. Official-looking documents with government seals. The first one was a death certificate for someone named Robert Webb. Died September 11th, 2001, in New York City. Age 43. Webb. My last name. I flipped through the other documents quickly. Birth certificate. Social security card. Marriage license. Divorce papers. All for Robert Webb. At the very bottom was a photo. A man in his 40s, wearing a suit, standing in front of the Twin Towers. On the back, written in pen, Rob at his office, September 10th, 2001. I stared at the photo, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The man in the photo looked exactly like me. Older, Yes, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same nose, same eyes, same slightly crooked smile. I walked back into the house, carrying the envelope. My dad was in the living room, watching football. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "Who is Robert Webb?" He looked up at me, saw what I was holding, and his face went pale. "Where did you find that?" "In a box in the garage." "Who is he?" My dad was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and turned off the TV. "Sit down, Alex." I sat down on the couch, still holding the envelope. "Robert Webb was my half-brother," my dad said quietly. "Your uncle?" "I guess, though you never met him. He died in the September 11th attacks. He worked in the North Tower. Why didn't you ever tell me about him?" "It was too painful. We weren't close. He was from my father's first marriage, and after my parents split up, Robert stayed with his mom, and I barely saw him. By the time I was an adult, we'd lost touch completely. I didn't even know he was working in New York until after he died." My dad looked at the photo in my hands. "The government sent me those documents after the towers fell, since I was listed as his next of kin. I put them away and tried to forget about it. Did you ever meet him? After you were both adults?" "Once. At my father's funeral in 1998. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He seemed like a good guy. Said he was working in finance in New York, doing well for himself. That was it. That was the only conversation I had with him as an adult." I looked down at the photo again. Robert Webb, my uncle, who died in the towers, and who looked exactly like me. "Dad, I need to tell you something. Something really weird has been happening to me." I told him everything. The dreams, the memories, the research I'd done into our family history. How every memory corresponded to an event that one of our relatives had experienced. And then I told him about the 9/11 memory. How I'd watched the planes hit the towers. How I'd been there on the street, witnessing it all. My dad listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "So you think you're remembering Robert's experience?" he finally asked. "I don't know what else it could be. The memory is so clear, Dad. I was there. I saw it happen. And now I know that Robert was there too. But how is that possible? You never met him. I barely knew him. How could you have his memories?" "I don't know. Maybe genetic memory can extend beyond direct ancestors. Maybe it can include anyone who shares your DNA, even distant relatives." I looked at the photo again. Or maybe it's something else. Something we don't understand yet. My mom had walked in at some point during this conversation. She sat down next to my dad, looking worried. "Alex, honey, have you talked to a doctor about these dreams?" "I've been seeing a therapist. She thinks it might be genetic memory, but she's not sure. She wanted me to see a neurologist, but I haven't yet." "I think you should," my mom said gently. "What you're describing sounds like it could be a medical condition. Maybe a form of false memory syndrome, or something neurological. But it's not false memories," I insisted. "Everything I've remembered actually happened. And the details are too specific, too accurate to be things I just made up or learned about somehow. Maybe your brain is accessing information you don't consciously remember learning," my dad suggested. "Like, maybe you saw a documentary about 9/11 when you were younger, and your brain stored those details and is now presenting them as memories. Then how do you explain the fact that I remembered being at a Beatles concert in the exact spot where my grandmother was standing? I didn't know she'd been to that concert until after I had the memory. They didn't have an answer for that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Robert Webb, about how he died in the towers, about how I'd experienced his last morning through his eyes. And then I realized something that made me sit up in bed. The memory hadn't ended with the planes hitting. I'd woken up right after the second plane hit, too distressed to continue. But what if there was more? What if I could access the rest of Robert's memories from that day? I didn't want to. The thought of experiencing someone's death was horrifying, but I also felt like I owed it to him somehow, to remember his last hours, to bear witness to what he'd gone through. So I lay back down and tried to relax, tried to open myself up to the memory, to let it continue. And it did. I was back on the street, staring up at the burning towers. People were running now, panicking, trying to get away from the buildings. But I wasn't running. I was standing there, paralyzed, because I worked in that building. My office was on the 94th floor. My coworkers were up there. My friends, people I had lunch with every day, people I complained about work with, people I knew everything about. They were all up there, above the impact zone, trapped. I started running toward the building. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Help somehow. Get people out. Something. A police officer grabbed my arm and stopped me. "Sir, you need to evacuate the area. Get away from the buildings." I work there. I heard myself saying, "I need to help." You can't help. The best thing you can do is get to safety. But I couldn't just leave. So I stood there at the police barricade, watching the towers burn. Watching people jump from the upper floors because burning to death was worse than falling. Watching the smoke pour out and turn the bright blue sky dark. And then, at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. The sound was indescribable, like the whole world was ending. A roar that swallowed everything else. The ground shook. A massive cloud of dust and debris rushed down the streets, swallowing everyone and everything in its path. People started running again, screaming, trying to outrun the cloud. I ran too. Ran until my lungs were burning, until I couldn't breathe, until the dust cloud caught up with me and everything went dark. I crouched down next to a car, covering my face with my shirt, choking on dust and smoke. I couldn't see anything. Couldn't hear anything except alarms and screaming and that terrible roaring sound. When the dust finally started to settle, I looked up. The South Tower was gone. Just gone. Where a 110-story building had been standing minutes ago, there was now just smoke and rubble and that awful cloud still spreading through the streets. And the North Tower, my building, was still standing, still burning. And I knew, everyone knew, that it was going to fall too. It was just a matter of time. It fell at 10:28 a.m. I watched it happen, watched it collapse floor by floor, folding in on itself, disappearing into a cloud of dust and smoke. And when it fell, I felt something break inside Robert, because his friends were in there, his co-workers, people he cared about, and they were all gone. I woke up gasping, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I couldn't breathe. The emotional weight of what I'd just experienced was crushing. I'd felt Robert's grief, his horror, his helplessness, and I knew that he'd carried that trauma with him for the rest of his life. Except he hadn't had much life left. According to the death certificate, Robert had died later that same day, not in the towers themselves, but from the effects of the dust and debris. He'd inhaled so much toxic material that his lungs had been destroyed. He'd died in a hospital that evening, surrounded by other people who'd been caught in the collapse. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and that's when I saw it. On my arm, there was a bruise. A dark purple bruise in the exact spot where the police officer had grabbed Robert to stop him from running toward the towers. I touched it. It hurt. A real, physical pain. That wasn't possible. The memory had happened yesterday in my sleep. There was no way it could have left a physical mark. But there it was. Proof that these weren't just memories or dreams or hallucinations. Something real was happening to me. Something that was affecting my actual physical body. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the bruise. My hands were shaking. This was beyond genetic memory, beyond anything that could be explained by psychology or neurology. This was something else, something impossible, and I had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, I drove back to Portland. I didn't tell my parents about the bruise. I didn't tell them about the full memory of 9/11. I just thanked them for Thanksgiving and left. On the drive home, I made a decision. I was going to document everything, write it all down, record videos, take photos. If this was really happening, if I was somehow accessing memories from my dead relatives, and it was leaving physical evidence, then I needed to prove it. Not just for myself, but because this might be important. This might be something that could help science understand consciousness or memory or DNA in a completely new way. When I got back to my apartment, I set up my phone on a tripod and started recording. My name is Alex Webb. I'm 21 years old. For the past year, I've been experiencing memories from my ancestors and relatives. Events they lived through that I'm now remembering as if they were my own experiences. At first, I thought I was going crazy. Then I thought it might be genetic memory. But now I think it's something more than that. I showed the bruise on my arm to the camera, explaining what had happened. Then I took out all my documentation, the notebook with all the memories I'd written down. The family photos. The research showing connections between my memories and my relatives' lives. And the documents about Robert Webb. I'm going to continue documenting this, I told the camera. Every memory I have, every physical symptom, everything. Because I think this is real. I think this is actually happening. And I think other people need to know about it. Over the next few months, I became obsessed with documenting and understanding what was happening to me. I recorded videos after every significant memory. I took photos of any physical marks that appeared. I researched everything I could find about genetic memory, ancestral trauma, and consciousness. And I found something interesting. I wasn't the only one this was happening to. There were other people online sharing similar experiences. Not many, maybe a few dozen that I could find, but they were out there. People who were remembering historical events they'd never personally experienced. People who were showing up in old family photos that they'd never seen before. People who had knowledge of things they'd never learned. I reached out to some of them, started comparing notes, and we all had similar stories. It had started suddenly, usually in late teens or early 20s. The memories were always of historical events, specifically American history, and they always related somehow to family or ancestors. One woman told me she'd been remembering the Great Depression, living through it day by day as if she were her great-grandmother. She could describe exactly what it felt like to be hungry, to stand in bread lines, to watch her children go without so she could give them what little food she had. A man told me he'd been experiencing the Vietnam War through his father's eyes. Not just the combat, but the fear, the nightmares afterward, the difficulty adjusting to civilian life. Another person was remembering the AIDS crisis in the 80s, watching friends die while the government did nothing. We were all living through our ancestors' traumas, reliving the most painful moments in American history through the eyes of our relatives who'd been there. But why? And why now? One of the people I connected with online had a theory. Her name was Dr. Sarah Kim, and she was a researcher studying epigenetics and trauma inheritance. There's been research showing that traumatic experiences can leave marks on DNA, she explained over a video call. These marks can be passed down to children and grandchildren. It's called epigenetic inheritance. Usually it just manifests as increased anxiety or PTSD-like symptoms. But what if, in some cases, it's more than that? What if the actual memories can be passed down? But that seems impossible, I said. Memories are stored in the brain, not in DNA. We think they're stored in the brain, Dr. Kim corrected. But we don't fully understand consciousness or memory. What if there's more to it than we know? What if significant events, traumatic experiences, moments of intense emotion somehow get encoded into our DNA in a way we haven't discovered yet? And that would explain why it's happening now, in our 20s? Possibly. Early adulthood is when a lot of genetic expressions activate. It's when you see hereditary diseases start to manifest, when certain physical traits become more pronounced. Maybe it's also when these inherited memories become accessible. It was the best explanation I'd heard so far, but it still didn't explain the physical marks. The bruises that appeared after certain memories. The scars that some people in our group were reporting. Dr. Kim wanted to study us, run tests, take DNA samples, scan our brains while we were having these experiences. She believed this could be a major scientific breakthrough if we could prove it was real and figure out the mechanism behind it. I agreed to participate in her research, so did most of the others in our group. But then something happened that changed everything. I had another memory, but this time it wasn't from the past. I was sitting in my apartment one evening, just watching TV, when suddenly I was somewhere else. I was in a car, driving down a highway. It was dark outside, late at night, and I wasn't controlling the car. I was a passenger in my own body, watching through someone else's eyes. The person driving looked at the car's clock, 2:47 a.m. Then they looked at the GPS. It showed a route to Portland, Oregon, to my address, my apartment address. I snapped back to reality, heart pounding. That wasn't a memory from the past. That was happening right now. Someone was driving to my apartment in the middle of the night. I looked out my window. The street was empty. No headlights approaching. But the memory had felt real, just like all the others. I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Kim. Something weird just happened. I had a memory, but it was in present time. Someone driving to my apartment right now. That's not possible, she said. All the memories people have been reporting are from the past, from their relatives' experiences. You can't access someone's consciousness in real time. I know it doesn't make sense, but I saw it. Someone is coming here. Alex, I think you might be having a panic attack or a different kind of episode. The stress of everything might be. That's when I heard a car pull up outside. I looked out the window. A black sedan was parking in front of my building.